Hopefully it doesn't mess up. Yeah. So
Mm.
just to recap the things we'll be learning arrays, objects, and the DOM. So yes, just so I don't have to re-record the first one. So for anyone who is watching, the homework is due today. So please do well to send it in. I'll share the link to submit the homework after class. Okay. Uh, okay. So in our last class, we learned about arrays. We said sometimes we need to store the same things in the same place. So instead of using variables for everything, we said that we could store them in an array. So we said an array is a way where we could easily group related items. We said that there are two ways that we could create an array. We said we could use the array constructor, which is new array, to initialize the array and fill in with the stuff we want to fill in. Or we could just use a square brackets notation to just the start of an array. The other thing we also said was that arrays are indexed. So every item in the array has an index. And the first thing is in position 0, which is index 0. So we can access the different things in an array using their index. So in this example, if we wanted to access the Wolf of Wall Street, it will be movies item at index 0. If we wanted to access Zootopia, it will be movies, the item at index 1, and so on and so forth. We said that we could get the length of the array by using the dot length property. And then the last thing in the array, we could do array.len -1 to get the last thing in the array. We said there are few methods and properties of arrays that we could use. So array methods, we said we could add things to an array using the dot push. So we could add things to the end of the array by pushing it on. We could remove the last thing on the array by popping it. So we can use the dot pop method to remove the last thing on the array. We could remove the first thing in the array by using the shift method, and we could add something to the beginning of the array by using the onShift. And we said we could copy items from a particular index, a starting position to an ending position using a slice. So we could slice into the array. We also spoke about how we could loop over the array, so we can iterate over the array and do things over. So we said we could use the for loop that we looked at, and we could also use the the const of, so the for of method. So we could use a regular for loop, or we could use the for of loop to loop over an array. So this is basically the things that we covered in the last class. Any questions? Okay. So to jump into the first thing we want to look at today is objects. Now, objects, when we started looking at data types. We said there were 7 data types. I mean, there were 8, but 7 were primitives. And we said that those ones are called primitives because they just have the same thing. So we spoke about strings, we spoke about numbers, we spoke about begins, null, undefined. We said those ones are primitives because they just have a single thing. Now, the 8th data type we want to look at, which is probably the most powerful, are objects. So what objects allow us to do is objects allow us to store a collection of various things using a key and value. And we'll dig more into what that means. So before we look more into details, this is how we initialize an array. So again, like the way we could do a new array for an array, we could also use the object constructor to initialize a new object, where we do new objects with parentheses. But most times you will just use the literal notation where you use 2 curly braces to signify that whatever is coming afterwards is an object. So let's quickly look at some examples. So I'll just create a plain document and we'll try and look up, write, and understand objects. So object Okay, so we said that, and let me link it so that we can access it. Okay, and let me just open this in the browser. Open my live server. Okay, so I'm just opening it here so that when I make changes, we can see and we can go through them. Okay, so nothing fancy so far. I'll just open up the console. And at any point, if you can't hear me, you can just put it in chat. So the way we said we do an object is we use the curly braces. So if I do const, let's say person is equal to this. If I console, just to see, let me console the log type of person. So if I console log the type of person, we can see that it's an object. So we've initialized an object by using the curly braces. Now we said objects are used to store key and values. So we can store a collection of things. Now, for example, if we had authors and wanted to store their names and their books, we could use an object to store the key and value. So for example, we could have name, and we could have John, or let's do first name. First name John, and we could do last name. I don't know, maybe last name Tim. Then we could do date of birth, 23rd. Let's just do 23rd. Oh, sorry, 23rd March 1972. Ignore my mixed case and let me just change this. Okay, cool. I'm not familiar with this keyboard. So with an object, we could store things about, let's say, a person where we could give it a key. So here in this instance, we have a key first name and we have a value John. We also have a key last name and we have a value Tim. We have a date of birth and we have this. So with an object, we can store different things. We can store keys and values. So in times when we want to store keys and values, our best bet is to use an object. Now, if we want to access the things in the object, we can use what we call the dot syntax. So for example, if we wanted to access the first name, so let me console the log. Person, so the person is the thing, and we could do person or first name. So here we can see that we can use the dot property to access things in the object. So person dot first name, we get John. If we wanted to get the date of birth, we could also do the same thing and do last name. And we can see that the last name is Tim. So we can store things in an object, and we can use different ways we can use the dot syntax to access the different keys in the object. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay, great. Now there are other ways. So if we have this person object and we wanted to add new things, we could also use the same way to add it. So we could do person dot, maybe we want to add a book. Maybe they wrote a book. So we could do person dot book is equal to the last bender. And now if we console the log person, we can see that we have an object. We have an object with their date of birth, the book, the first name. So we can also add things to the object using the dot syntax, where this becomes the key and this becomes the value. So we can access the property using the key and we get the value. So same way we could add more things. Now, these things are called properties. So book is a property of person. First name is a property. So any key we add becomes a property. So all these things are properties of the person. Now, the more we go on today, we'll see more examples of objects. But in summary, or just to is there any other thing? Okay, so we could also objects can take multiple things. So for example, we could add an array. So person dot maybe children. So let's say he has children. So if the person has children, so we could do maybe Jeff, Amy, and maybe Lee. So we could also add an array to the object. So if we check where console login, let me move the console log. Sorry, let me move the console log. Okay. Now, if I move the console log before, now if we save this, we can see that now we have an object. The object has a property children, and the children is an array of names. So we can use objects to store all kinds of data types. So we can use it to store arrays. We can use it to store numbers and everything. So objects are very powerful. And most times you would encounter objects the most because most things, like we always say, everything in JavaScript is an object. So objects are like the most powerful, I guess, data type, which we'll encounter the most. Now, any questions about objects before we move on? We'll come back to it as we go through today's examples, but any questions so far? I hope I'm not, okay, great. Okay, so what we want to talk about today is and I just quickly wanted to go over objects. We'll come back to them. What we want to talk about today is the document object model. Now, in our time together, whenever we write up a program and we open it in our browser, we see it open in our browser. Now, what we see open in our browser is what we call a document. Now, when you open it in your browser, what you see is just a representation of your code. It's just a representation of all the code that you have written. So the document object model, like I said, is a programming interface for web documents. It represents the page so that programs can change the document structure and style. So when we write a program and we open it, what we see in the browser is not really our code. It's just a representation of our code, and it's represented as a document. So with the DOM, we can make changes because then our code is represented in a way that we can make changes in it. We can interact, we can do different things with it. So what the document object model allows us to do is it allows us to easily manipulate the document. So we don't always have to necessarily go into our code to change things. We can use the benefit of it being a representation of our code to make changes to it. And hopefully, as we go over it today, it will make more sense. So this is how, when we open up our code in the browser, this is how it is represented. This is how the document object model is. So the first thing, the highest level is, this is how our code is, our program is displayed. Especially for now, we just stick to the browser because everything we do it in the browser. So this is how our code is represented in the browser. Our program is represented as a document. Now, our document has different nodes. So we have the root element, which is the HTML, because we are writing our code in HTML. Then we have different elements. So we have the head, we have the body. So this is just for a visual representation of how our code is when we open it up in the browser. So it becomes a document, and the document is like a tree-like structure. So it has different nodes. So these are all different child nodes. that we can use to make changes and we can use to do stuff to it. Now, like I said, the document represents our web page and we can do stuff to it. So my plan is for us to actually go over it and try and do stuff. So just to show this, let me save this. So we have a simple thing here. Now we already have this open in the browser. So let me minimize this. Okay, so we have this open in the browser. So as we can see, because we are saying that it's a document, it means that we can access it using the document keyword. So the first thing we want to know is, because our page is represented as a document, if we were to console.log document, we can see that, and this is probably a lot, so don't get confused. But when we console log document, these are all the things that we have opened in our browser. So everything in our page here is represented by this. So we can see it's an object with a lot of properties. So we can see that it has forms, it has fonts, it has elements, it has a document type, what we put at the top. It has all these things. So the document is just a representation of our web page. So we can access it and do stuff with it. So in our time together today, we'll try and use the document to understand what is going on when we actually open our page. So we're saying that if we want to access any page in our HTML, we can start with accessing the document object because the document represents our web page. So there are different things we can do. So in this example that we have, and give me 1 second, let me open this up quickly. Okay, so just to, what the document object model allows us to do is, because we know that our web page is represented as a document, what we can do is we can then use JavaScript to change the elements. So we can change the HTML elements in it. We can change the CSS. We can remove things. We can add new things, all using JavaScript without actually having to come into our code and write new things. We can change things by the power of the document object model. So what we are going to learn for the rest of our time together is how to change the content of our HTML, how to change the styling, how to react with DOMs, and we'll learn about events. So just a quick example, I said that we could change things. So for example, if we had an H1 that said that my name is Thomas, we could do something like this. So we said that our page is a document. So if we want to access it, we always use the document keyword, document.get. And this is just to quickly show you document dot, let's just get query selector, H1. And let me still open this by the side so that we'll see. So currently we can see that we said my name is Thomas. Now we said because it is a document, we can access it and do stuff with it. So here's me accessing the document. I'm accessing the H1, and don't worry, we'll go over this. And I can change it. So I can change dot inner HTML is equal to Mr. Thomas here. So now when I change, you see that based on using the properties of the document, I've been able to change the content of the page because I can access the document and do stuff with it and change the content of my HTML without having to. So you can see that this is what I actually have. So if I were to refresh, I've already changed this. So this is what I actually have. So if I comment this out, if I comment this line out and I save, you can see that this is my content. By using the power of the document object model and the fact that my page is represented as a document, I could actually come into it, pick it up and change things. So now I want to change the HTML to Mr. Thomas here. So these are some of the fun things we'll hopefully be doing today in our time together. Any questions before we dive further into document object model? Okay.
Please does it mean that Like, so with this, you can make changes like on any web page.
You can, so like you can go, are you asking if you can go on someone's website and make changes?
Yeah.
So you can always go on anybody's website and make changes. For example, just like a quick example, let's go to Twitter, and then just to show you that you could do that already without needing. So let's say I can see that the background is black. So let's just inspect uh this. I want to see the parents element. Okay, so let's just take this one. Oh, let me just take a simple button.
Mm.
Let me take the button. Okay, so we can see that the button has a color of blue. So I could come and change the button to a color of red. So now the button has a color of red. I could, I could change more things. I could, here it says what is happening. It says what is happening, right? I hope it says what is happening.
Yeah.
Okay. If I can only find where the what is happening is, let me check it properly. I have to open this thing. Okay, I have to zoom in. I don't want to zoom in. But let's see. Okay. Okay, it says for you. I can find this one. So I can change that for you to where did it pass? Okay, I removed that for you. But the thing about doing it in the browser is, and even this one says tweet, I can change it to maybe shout. Uh, shout. I'm using my other keyboard. So that I've deleted it instead of I was going to change the text, but I ended up deleting. So you can make changes to the code in the browser, but the thing about doing it in the browser is you don't have access to their code base. So you are just doing it in the browser. So all the changes you have is in your own browser. So if I were to refresh, it will go back to the original thing because then if I refresh, I'm making a request to Twitter again. And the changes I made were just on my machine. So to be able to make these changes,
Oh,
so this is their code, but any change I make here, I'm just making it in my version because I don't have access to your browser. I don't have access to, yeah. So you can make changes to any website, but then, for example,
okay.
their background color is black. But let's change it from black to, let's change it to white because black is the devil. So we can change the background. So we can see we've changed this side from black. We could also change
Oh.
this. So you can do fun things in the in the browser console. Like if you go on a website, you can see what styles they are using, what things they are using. Thankfully they didn't make this white because now that I made it white, you can barely see any.
Yeah.
So we can make changes. But the thing is, because we don't have access to their code here, whenever we refresh it, it'll go back to the original thing. So to make lasting changes, you actually have to make it in the code base. But then with document object model, what we can do is in our code base, we can do things, we can get things to change, we can listen for events. We can when we click things, we can change colors, we can do fun things in our code base where it is responsive because we have the power of the document, we can make our page more dynamic where we can change the text based on something. We can change the text based on click. We can change the text based on hover and stuff like that. So that when people are on our website, it's more dynamic and it's just not because right now, if I just have the HTML, it's static. It'll always be this. It'll always be my name is Thomas. But then with JavaScript and taking the power of the document object model, we can change things so that our page is dynamic, where it's not just static. Because when you have HTML, it's just static. What you put there is what will always be there. But then when we tap into the power of the DOM, we can make it dynamic and change things as and when based on maybe if a user is clicking things and stuff like that. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So just to go over a few things. So there are a lot of DOM properties. So the first one is inner HTML, where we can change the HTML content. So for example, when we had this, we can say, and I said every time we want to access it, we have to begin it with document. So if we want to access the things in the document, we use the document keyword. Then what we want to access. Now this thing, let me just minimize this. One of the properties is this get element by ID. So what that essentially means is there are a few of them. There is get uh get elements. Why do I keep, let me just type on my keyboard. Get elements by ID. There is also a query selector, and we talk about what all of them does. And there are lots more, but most time these are the two that you probably use. Now, when we say get element by ID, we could go into the DOM and get elements with a particular ID. We could go into the DOM and get elements with a particular, like, we could get particular elements. So we could go into the DOM, get a paragraph, get divs, get sections. So the way we do that is, so we always precede it with document because we are going into the DOM. So documents dot, if we say query selector is we are trying to select something from the DOM. If we say ID, it means specifically what we are going to select is an ID. So if we wanted to use a select by ID, we could give this an ID of maybe hello. Then we could come in here and do get element by, so we're trying to get an element with the ID hello. So when we get the element with the ID hello, then we could do anything that we want with it. So for example, if I could open this again. For example, if we wanted to get this and wanted to change the style. So we have this, it's currently black. So we could get document or get element by ID. And let me just save it in a variable so that we could use it for several things. So my name is equal to, so I'm just storing this. So essentially all we are doing is that we've gone into the DOM. So we've gone into the DOM, our representation of our code, and we are looking for something that has the ID of hello. So in this instance, we see that this H1 has an ID of hello. So that's exactly what we are grabbing. Now we could do things by, first of all, we are saying we could change the inner HTML. So we could do my name dot inner. So we're saying I want to change the content of it, the HTML. So we could change the content to my name is no longer Thomas. And if we save it, we can see that we've been able to change the content by using the document. So we've gone into the document, gotten the element with the ID hello, and we've changed it. We could also change the style. So we could do my name, and we know that style. We could do style, and let's maybe change the color. We said the way we change the color of an element is by the color property. So it's just the same CSS things we know. So we could change color to maybe red. If I save this, we can see that by using it, we are able to make our page dynamic and access it and do stuff, making it more dynamic. So we could use the DOM to change the HTML. We can use the DOM to change the CSS and stuff like that. We could also do maybe, okay, so let's take it one step at a time. So the first thing is some of the DOM methods. So one of the methods is to get element by ID. Now, query selector almost does the same thing, but query selector is more generic. So for example, if I wanted to get this H1, I'll just use a query selector. So if I do get a query selector, H1. So if I use query selector, I'm not specifying that as a class or object. I could just target the H1. So if I save it, it's still the same thing because now I'm still targeting the H1. So when you use query selector, you can target the elements. But when you say get element by ID, you are more specifically saying that you want to get something with an ID. So you just use the ID that you have. So it's a string. So you put hello. So for example, let me just add a paragraph. So let's say we have a paragraph. Hello. Hello, everybody. Now, if I save this, we have hello, everybody. I could use document of, you always start with document dot query selector. Then I could get, I want the paragraph. So then I could also change maybe the star. Let's give it a background color. We'll give it a background color is equal to blue. If I save this, we can we can see that. So we could grab our things in the DOM and do dynamic stuff with them without having to like have a static. So we could do dynamic stuff. As we progress, we'll do even more dynamic stuff where it's more interactive. But so for any questions, so the first thing we want to look at is the method get query selector and get element by ID. There's one other property which is get query selector or query selector or. So for example, if I had multiple paragraphs, let's say I had another paragraph with random text. Then I had another paragraph with more random, or let me just, I am seeing something. Query selector, or if we wanted to grab all of them at once, we'll use query selector or. So instead of selecting them one by one, we could do query selector or. So what we could do was change this to query selector. So in this line, all I'm saying is I want to select everything that has the element paragraph. And if I save this, if I document on query selector or paragraph dot style dot background. Okay, sorry, let's say that. Dot in our HTML, let's go to. Okay, so we can use the query selector or to select everything. So we could get all the paragraphs. But if we wanted to get every single one, like we just wanted to get one, then we would use the maybe query selector. If we wanted to be more specific and get things by ID, so if we give this one like an ID, jump, ignore my ID names. So we could get element by ID, document dot get element by ID. The ID is jump. And then we could do something to it. So, I mean, maybe we shouldn't do the star. Maybe let's do something else. The inner HTML is equal to okay. So yeah, you could get the element by ID jump and change it. So now as I am jumping. So does that make sense so far? So those are some of the properties of the DOM. So those are some DOM properties and methods. The inner HTML, if you want to change the content in the HTML, we can grab it using either by the ID or by just selecting it with the element name. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now there are more things we could also do with it. And in the code I shared, I have an example. I have one example that I quickly built out. Okay, so in this, I just have an H1 with a name with some random text. Welcome to my page, and a paragraph. This is a sample text, and let me uncomment her. So I'm grabbing them, and maybe I should open them side by side so that we can see. Open split left. So in this example, I have an H1 with the ID title. I have a paragraph with the ID content. So I'm just grabbing them. So I'm grabbing the element with the ID title, which is the H1. And I'm grabbing the content. I'm grabbing the element with the ID content. And if we open this in the browser, let me open this in the browser. Okay. If I open this in the browser, why is it so small? Response. Okay, so I have this is some sample text. I don't know why my text is so small, but let me try and open it. Okay, so I have this is this and this is this. Now in my JavaScript, I have this where I want to access it. So without if I comment this out, if I comment this out, we can see that we have this content and maybe let me just bring it back. We have this, we have what is in the HTML. So welcome to my page. This is some sample text. Now I can change the inner HTML if I uncomment this out and I save it. We can see that now using the power of the DOM, I can change the content in my page. Now I've changed it to hello world and this is some new text. So it's not just the static things which were in my HTML. Now the more fun things I guess you can do with the DOM and stuff like that is to listen for events and stuff like that. And let's just look at one quick event before we when we come back from the break, we can go deeper into it. So I'll close this up. I'll close this up. And we've looked at this example briefly. And let me drag uh, background pickup index. Okay, so in this example, I just have this simple thing. In the code is just I have an H1, which is YouTube background picker. Then I have an image. So this is just the image. It's just an image, so nothing special. So we have an image. Then we have these three boxes. We have one with purple, we have one with green, and we have one in ID. Now, where it gets fun is if we look at the JavaScript code. So all we are doing is, and we'll look at this when we come back from the break, we'll look at it into depth. So we are grabbing so all of them have an ID. One has an ID of purple, one has an ID of green, one has an ID of blue. So we are just grabbing them. And I'm saying that when we click on them, we've written some custom functions that change the background to purple, change the background to green, change the background to blue. So when you whichever one you click on, change the background. So if we click on purple, we can see that it changes based on the power of the dog. We're able to change the background on click. If we click on this, we're able to change the background to green. If we click on blue, we're able to change the background to blue. So this is all some of the dynamics that the DOM allows us to do. It allows us to build more dynamic applications where it's responsive to our users. It's responsive to what our users are doing. It's responsive to our users' interactions and all those things. Any question? We'll take a break early today. Then when we come back, we'll look at events and then hopefully that'll be more fun. So any questions before while I set up the timer?
No.
Okay, great. So we'll just take a 5 minutes break and I'll pull this here. And when we come back, we'll look at some more fun stuff. So see you after the break. Okay, so welcome back. Uh, no, let me just share the entire screen. Okay, can you hear me, please? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay, okay. Did you take a break?
yes.
Okay, great, great. So just to quickly recap what we've been going over. So we've been, we quickly spoke about, and let me just close this. We've been talking about objects, and if you remember when we started, we spoke about objects, and we said objects are just key value properties. So you have keys, you have values, and we've been saying that it's a document object model. So the document in essence is also an object. It's an object that has keys and values. So, for example, when we say a method, if you have a function, so for example, this object could have, let's say, another key, and this is obviously another key, and the key can be a function. So just the regular functions we've been writing. Now, when we say a method is simply, it's nothing deep. It's a function that is tied to an object. So for example, when we said get element, when we did document dot get element by ID, and we said it is a method. So it's just that when we go into, so this is how you can visualize it. So it means we have an object called documents that comes as part of the specs, so the JavaScript specs and our browser specs. It means in our browser specs, we have an object called documents, and our document, it has a method, which is just a function. So it has a get element by ID, which is just a function that does something. Thankfully, we didn't have to write that, but it does something. It gets, sorry, it's when you're doing functions, when you're doing this, use I don't know why this is the trial error, semicolon. We don't assign it using the quotes, we just do, yes. So essentially, all this is saying is that in our document object, we have a method. So a method is just a function. So it's a key where the value is a function. So in our document object, we have this function, get element by ID, and it is doing something. And we didn't have to write it ourselves. They've already written it. It comes as part of the spec. So the document is just an object. And when we console logged it, let me just do it directly in the browser. If we console the log document, we can see, so it's an object. This is saying it's an object. We can see all the things that comes with it. And this is just showing my document that I have. But if I didn't have anything, so let me just open a new one so that we can see all the objects. There are thousands and thousands of objects of properties in the document objects. We can't go over all, and you probably don't need half of them. I'm still showing the same thing. Uh, Let me just write it here. It's just giving me the document I have opened. It's not giving me, I don't want the one I have opened, but if I open this in the browser. Okay, okay. So it has already built the node, but it's just, so the document is just like a representation of our page. And it's just a representation of everything that we do. So when we open our page in the browser, what we see is a representation of it, and that is what we call the document object model. So there are so many properties that comes with it. So for example, when I do the dot, these are some of the properties that comes with it. So you have children, we're using the get element by ID. So we can see that it's one of the properties that the DOM has. So it's just an object like the objects we've been doing. and it has so many properties that is already written for us to use. It already comes as part of the specs that we can use, so we don't have to write it ourselves. But just so that it clicks on how it is an object. It's just the same object that we've been doing. The document is an object with different properties. Now, another thing we want to look at now is, if I scroll down, I can see, let's see. Okay, we have so many, we don't need to get into all of them. For example, you can see the doc type, uh, the doc type. So the document type, the reason we do doc type is that our browser will be able to recognize it. The doc type is just a property of the document. So many things that when you start to understand, it's like mind blowing. The head, all those things are just properties of the document object. Now, the next thing I want us to get into is events. Now, one thing we can do based on the rendering of our page is that we can respond based on events. So events are things that happens in the system when you're programming, which the system tells you about, so your code can react to them. So events are things that happens and we can react to them. And because we have the DOM, we can dynamically program or write our applications to respond to events. It can respond to things. For example, when a user clicks over something, when the user chooses a key on the keyboard, so we can program it to be able to tell what key the user is pressing on their keyboard.
Yes.
Hello.
Just a minute. I need to grab my charger.
Okay, no problem.
I'll be back. Yes, I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, great. So, like we're saying, events are things that happens, and based on those events, we can do things. So we can do things based on events. Now, most of the time, the things we've been doing is click. So when a user clicks something, do something. That's an example of an event. So there are several examples of events. So for example, when they click or hover over an element, we can do something. When they choose a key on a particular keyboard. So for example, when they press kill, we can program that when the user presses kill, do something. We could also program something that when the page is downloading, do something, and things like that. So just to quickly get into events and go over some events that we can do. I guess events are fun. I mean, to be able to program what should happen when a user does something is fun. So we'll just quickly do an example. So let me close all these. So in our HTML, let's just put into practice all the things that we've covered so far. So let's just maybe do a div. Let's do mouse. Or I guess let me do it in safe. Let me do it in animation. So I started writing now. So I have this div. It's just mouse over me. So if we open this in the browser, open in other browsers. So if we open, it's just mouse over me. I have not a lot of CSS. It's just a few lines. So I'm giving it a background color. I'm giving it a width, a height, and the space within the box. So it's just simple. So that's what we have. Now let's do the fun thing by being able to do dynamic things. So we said some of the things we can do is based on user events. So let's try let's try doing something fun if the user hovers over it. So if the user were to pass their cursor over it, let's try and do something. So maybe if they pass their cursor over it, let's change the text. So first of all, we said the way we can do that is we can grab, every time we want to grab it, we start with document. So let's just say, let me store the div in document. Let me see if it has an ID. It doesn't have an ID, so let me just grab it directly, dot query selector, and let's grab the div. So all I'm doing is I'm grabbing this div. So it's a div, so I'm just grabbing it so that we can do things with it. So now I've saved it in a variable called div conveniently. Now let's do something. First off, maybe when they hover over it, let's change the text. Maybe if they pass their cursor over it, let's change the text. So first of all, we can do div dot an event that comes with with the DOM or the document is mouse over. So when you put your mouse over something, you can do something. So it's just on mouse. And usually when you start typing it, it'll bring up IntelliSense to show you all the different things. So let's just do on mouse over. So this is when we pass our mouse over. So when we pass our mouse over, we want to do something. So let's write out a function for mouse over. Okay. So all I'm saying is that when the mouse passes over, we want to do this. We haven't written this yet. We'll write it. So let's just write it. So let's just write a function. Let's call it move over. Then all we want to do is when the mouse passes over, we want to change the content and maybe say something like, you have passed over me. So we said that we can change the inner HTML, the same things we learned about how we can change the inner HTML. We've already grabbed the div, so I don't need to grab it again. So I can just do div dot inner HTML is equal to maybe you have passed over me. Then maybe let's do something for when the mouse passes over, but when you remove the mouse off it, let's try and do something with that one too. So for example, div, there's another event that comes mouse out. So when you move your mouse from the thing on mouse, and I mean, you don't have to have all these off here. Yeah, I mean, I know some of these because I've used them before, but there are too many. There are too many things to remember. So this is my custom function. So I'm saying that on mouse out, I want to do something. So what I'm assigning is what I want to do. Now I haven't written this yet, so I can just come and do a function and call it mouse out. Then I can, again, let's take the div, let's change the contents and say maybe, okay, maybe here, mouse over me. Why am I typing? Mouse over me. Then maybe here we can say, thank you very much. I mean, thank you very much. Okay, so just to go over, this is an event. So this is not something that this is an event that comes as part of the DOM. So we are saying that on mouse over, so when the mouse is over the thing, so when you have, like the way when I have the mouse over, so this is an example of a mouse event. You see, when I put the mouse over, you see that a modal sort of pops up with. So that's an example of a mouse event that when you put the mouse on it, let something happen. So you could program to do the same thing. So right now we are saying that when we have the mouse over, the text should change to thank you very much. And when we remove the mouse from it, so when I remove it here, when I remove the mouse from it, it disappears. But we are saying that when we remove it, we want to do mouse over. Does it make sense so far? Let me just change this color to maybe green, light green. Let me change it to light green. Okay. So if we open this, if we refresh, now just to go over the code again, we're saying that first of all, we've just grabbed this. We've grabbed this. So we said document.query selector div. So we are grabbing the div. Now we have two things. We said div, when we move over the mouse, we want to run this function mouse over. So mouse over, we are saying the mouse over function is just one line. We are saying that when we want to change the inner HTML to thank you very much. And we have another thing, the div on mouse out. So when we remove the mouse over, we want to change the content to mouse over me. Let's see if function works. So if I open the browser and I refresh, so when I put the mouse over, you can see that the content has changed. Thank you very much. Okay, let me save this. Let me refresh. If I put it, the mouse has changed to thank you very much. If I remove, it's supposed to say something else. So let's see why it is not saying anything. Let's see our console. So it's saying that move out is not defined. So we made a mistake. Okay, so here we are calling a mouse out. Here we are calling a move out. So that's why. So let's change it to move out so that our function name will match. So if we refresh, now when we put the mouse over, it says thank you very much. When we remove our mouse, it says mouse over me. When we put our mouse over it, it says thank you very much. When we move our mouse, it says over me. So in essence, we're able to use the DOM to do dynamic stuff. So in here, all we've done is that we've gone into the document object, we've grabbed the query selector, which allows us to take things in the DOM. So here we've come into the DOM. We see that we have an element we have an element div. So we just grabbed that. We've just grabbed that and we've stored that in a variable so that we don't, because if I don't do this, it means for example, if I didn't do it like that, I have to keep writing this. So here I have to write document. Here too, I have to write document. So I have to keep writing it, but just so that I don't keep writing it, that's why I've just stored it in a variable so that we can just use it once without having to repeat this line so many times. So that's what that line means. Now we are using the mouse over event. So we're saying that on mouse over, we want to do something. So if it doesn't make sense, you could like take this thing and just put it here directly. So on mouse over, we want to run a function. On mouse over, we want to run. I mean, you could write it inside directly. So when the mouse is over, you want to run a function, but just so it's cleaner, that's why I separated it so that it doesn't become too confusing. So I'm using on mouse over, this is the function I want to run and stuff like that. So in a DOM on mouse over, we say thank you very much, or when the mouse is not over. I mean, we could also, if we wanted to be fancy, we could also change the color. So we could do div dot background color, div dot style dot background color is equal to maybe red. So if we refresh it, whenever we are over it, the background color will change. When we are over, the background color will change. When we are over, the background color will change. And if we want to, we could change the color for when we are not over. So dot style dot background color equals maybe blue. So if we refresh this, when we are over, when we remove the blue, when we are over red, cool. Any questions? Does it make sense?
No.
Okay, would you like me to go?
Yeah. It's just, yeah, I think one more time. Yeah.
Okay, so
I
which
understand what to do, and it's just the like um defining the like from getting using the inner HTML
Mhm.
like from the function that side I think just going over will help me.
Oh, so I should go over the functions, what the function is doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. So let me comment this out for now. Uh, so first thing, we've grabbed this. This makes sense. We've grabbed this. Now we are saying that we are talking about events. So events are, like we said in the slides, events are things that we can programmatically do so that they respond to changes. So events are things that tells us when there are changes happening. So we can use the changes happening to do something. So if there's a change, we can do something. We said some of the changes are like when somebody clicks on something, that's an event. When somebody passes their mouse over something, even when you scroll, that's an event. So any change is an event. And we can use those events to do something. So we can capture the event and use it to do something. So we can say that if a user clicks, do something. If a user passes their mouse over something, do something. So that's what we are trying to do. So first off, we've grabbed this div, which is just us going into this and grabbing an element with the selector div. So we've grabbed that. Now, all we are saying now is that the first thing we want to do is we want to, and this is an event that comes with JavaScript mouse over. So don't worry about this. It's just an event, one of the events. And this event is for like when your mouse passes over stuff. So you can just take that event and do something with it. So now we are taking this event that comes as part of the DOM by saying that we want this event, which is on mouse over, which is a property that comes with the document. And we're saying that when the mouse passes over, we want to run a function called move over. This is a function that we are defining ourselves. So we could do anything. So for example, not to make it complicated, let's say if the mouse passes over, we just want to change the color. We could just do div, and we don't want to do anything fancy. We could just do div dot inner HTML equals hello. If anything, so we can say, all we are saying now is that when the mouse passes over, we want to change the content to hello. So if we refresh this, where is it? Okay. So now all we are saying is that, let me just do this. By saying that when the mouse passes, now we just want to change it. Okay. When the mouse passes over, we just want to change the content to hello. So, and when the mouse, let's say when the mouse moves out, so div dot on mouse. And we're saying these are just events that comes with JavaScript. So we are just doing something based on the event. So if the mouse is out of it, maybe we want to change the content to, by. So this is a simpler example. So if the mouse is over it, we want to change the content to hello. If the mouse is out of it, we want to change the content to by. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay. Okay, so when the mouse is out of it, we see by. So that's the same thing we're doing, but we're trying to do more things. So we said functions, we can tie different things in a function. So if we want to do a series of things, we just tie it in a function. So all we're doing was that we're saying, instead of doing it directly, we are saying that when the mouse is over it, we want to run a function called move over. And this one, when a mouse is out of it, we want to run a function called move out. These are functions that we are going to define ourselves. So the thing on the other side of the equal to is what we want to assign it to. So we're saying that when the mouse is over it, we have a function called move over, run that function. When the mouse is out of it, run this function called, we could also do like, maybe if you clicked on it, so on click, if you click on it, we could have another function. We could call it click me. So, and we could define a function called function click me. And we could tell the function to do something, maybe alert, hello. Well, so we've added an additional function where when you click on it, so if we were to, all these things are just functions that we are defining ourselves. So when you click on it, run a function called me. When you move the mouse, run a function. So if we uncomment all of these, and let me share this line of code in the chat just in case you can copy it into your thing. Okay, so if we run this here, so when the mouse is over this, if we click on it, it will do something. So we are just giving it different things to do based on different events. So when the mouse is over, change the color, change the text. When the mouse is over, do this. If you click on it, do something. You could add more events. You could do more things. Like even when they click on it, disappear or go somewhere else, all those things. I don't know if it makes sense. I mean, if it doesn't make sense, please feel free to ask me any question. Just talk me through how you're thinking about it. Maybe then it could help me help.
No, I understand it now, and I get it now.
Okay. So, okay. Based on that, we could do different things. Now there's another way where we could, let me see if I had, okay. There's another way where we could do the same thing. And let me close these ones just to quickly. And I shared this code in the class material, so most of these things should be there. Let me open this up, see what's this. Okay, we've already looked at this. DOM deletion. Okay, we didn't look at the DOM deletion, so not good code. Okay, so okay, I mean, not to go over this again, but let's continue with the event. So there are so many events, that come with JavaScript, and sometimes you want to do different, you can do what we call add an event listener. So you could listen for an event, you could listen for it before you run a function. So for example, let's say that let's see, what can we do? Let's say that we have a button. Maybe let's say we have a button. Let's say we have a button that has, we want to do like random colors. So let's do like change me. Why? I hate typing on this keyboard. I can't see when the caps lock light comes on. Okay, so it's all okay. Okay, change me. Okay, so we have a button with change me. So let me just open this in the browser. So it's just a simple button, nothing fancy. We just have a button. Now we can do what we call event listeners. So event listeners are just when, for example, we can let people, it's like when you have like somebody sitting at the door to hear if somebody is knocking, like if somebody is knocking, come and call me. So we can do something similar where we have event listeners. So listen for something. When you hear something, then do something else. So in the same way, for example, when we have this button, we could, as always, let's store the button in a variable so that I don't have to keep writing it. So const button is equal to, let's grab it, document dot query selector, because it's not an ID, it's a button. So let's grab this button. And then we can do what we call add event listeners. So event listeners are things that are listening for events. So we can specify which events that it should listen for. And when it hears that event, we want to do something. So for example, we can say that we want our button to listen for an event. So .add, that's what we call add event listeners. So listen for an event, listen, if that thing happens, do something. So we can say, for example, listen for a click. So if you hear a click, do something, maybe nothing fancy, alert, hello world. And alert is also a method. It's just a function that comes as part of. So when if we have the document object, and all the things that we use are usually, they are just the same things that we can write ourselves, but they are things that have already been written. So if you have the document object, it means it has alert, which is just a function that is doing something. And we can see that usually when we do it, and I don't know why I always do equal to, it's just a function that is doing something. So when we say alert, technically, normally when we're writing, we have to do like maybe window or document.alert so that it'll work. But because it's just already tied to it, that's why we don't always have to do like documents.alert or window.alert. But it's just a property that comes with the document object. So for example, when we console.log, console is also like, it's also a method that comes with the document. So all the things that we use are properties. They're either properties or methods. So it's just the same thing we've been writing, like functions, but they're already ones which are predefined or pre-written. So when we do those things, it's just like the same things we've been doing. So console.log is just a function. So it means you could also write a function that prints out your thing, but we don't need to write it because it's already written. So for example, in this one, we're adding an event listener. We are saying that listen for an event, and the event we want to listen for is a click. When you hear a click, alert or alert, I have been clicked. So we're adding an event listener to the button, and we're saying that when you click on the button, alert, I have been clicked. So if we save that and we open this and we refresh, now when we click on it, we can see that it says I have been clicked. When we click on, let me refresh. When you click on it, it says that I have been clicked. Now to make it, you could do other fancy things like the way we're doing. Like, so in the same way, we could maybe, instead of alerting something directly, we could have a function. So let's have a function, maybe change color. So all we are saying is that when they click on it, run a function called change color. We currently don't have the function yet, so we could write our own function. So it's almost the same thing as when we did the button dot on click. It's equal to change color. So it's the same thing where we're assigning when the button is clicked, run the function. So maybe this is probably more clear. So here you're adding an event listener. The event you want to listen for is a click. There are so many events. You could do like key down. So when the person presses their keyboard, like so many events, there's like thousands and thousands of events. So here we're saying that when the user clicks the button, run a function called change color. And we don't have the function yet, so we can pre-write it. And let's say function change color. And we could do something like, I don't know what we want to do. Maybe we want to let's change the whole body. So document the body. We said the body is part of the document. Because our page, when it renders, is just a representation, we could change anything. So we can take the whole body and then maybe change the color, change the background color. Star dot background color. And you can see it's camel case, like the way we write it. So when you're writing styling in JavaScript, it's camel case red. So when you click on the button document, when you click on the button, we want to change color. We want to run this function called change color. And all this function called change color is we've defined that I should just grab the body, which is in the document, and change the background color. Why is this thing opened? Okay. Okay. So let's run this and see. So if we click on this, 1 second. Okay. If we click on this, it changes the color to red. So all we did was say that when you listen for an event, listen for a click. And I don't know if you heard me click, but I actually clicked. I clicked it. So I'm saying that if you hear a click, run a function called change color. And all the function is saying is that change the body to this. I mean, we could probably, like, if we wanted to do like random numbers, and don't worry about this, but this is like a simple way we could do like random numbers. So maybe I could say change the color to a random number. And don't worry about this. I'm just changing the color to a random number. Just so that it's not all the same color. Let me see if it works, then I can come back and work. Okay, so whenever I click on it, change it to a random color. I hope you don't have this is probably too much, so let me just undo that. So it's just we are just adding an event listener. When you hear the event listener do something, there are so many event listeners. Let's see which other events.
Yeah, is that like, let's say how on Instagram when you um click maybe some the
Mhm.
button or double tap or something, then it
Yes.
likes so
Yes,
oh
yes, yes. So you could do an event for like double tap. If you double tap, change the color to this. So it's an event. So anytime you do something, it's considered as an event. So you can program for different things to happen on an event. So in the
okay.
same way, I could do like maybe when I hover over, and let me just, when I hover, I think hover is an event. If I hover over the button, change the color to, is it? Let me see the proper events. I know there's an event for Hoover. Let me just see. Hoover. Yeah. So there are so many like events that on my okay, I guess it was on mouse over. Yeah, so there are so many events that you could do based on like different things. But the whole idea I'm trying to communicate is that because when we open an application in the browser, it is represented as a document. Because it's represented as a document, we can take advantage of the fact that it's a document and do dynamic stuff with it without having to come into our code and actually change things. Like if we wanted to change to black, we don't have to come here and come and change the styling for the body to black. But we can, because of the fact that it's a document, we can take advantage of that and do dynamic things where we can listen for events. We can do things, change the inner content so that page is not always static. So for example, I can do whenever I scroll. So let's say whenever I scroll, let me, and I mean, I don't want us to go over all the events because there's too many events. So for again, let me just show you some of the events. Document dot on. So when I do like on play, so when I press play, when I click, when I close, when I copy. So when I copy, when I'm dragging, I can do something. When I drop it, when I drag and drop, I can do something. So when I key up, so when I press, so you see you can when you press your keyboard. So for example, I can do that whenever you press any key on your keyboard, then some sound will go off, like you do ke or do keke. Like so I can do plenty things, just take advantage of the fact that it's a document to make it more dynamic. When you press play, I can do something. When you press pause, I can do something. When you have a point. So there's so many events, like when you select something. So because of that, it gives you the tools to be able to do like so many things, so many fun stuff, so many things which you can't do with just like static HTML. And when we started, that's what we said. We said that HTML is for our content. So when we just want to write content, so on our page, we can see that, I mean, we just had a button. So HTML is the content. I mean, we could have used CSS to style there. So if we are like style.css, style.css, we could just take the button and give it maybe background color. Background color maybe red, yellow. We could take the button, give it a background color. And as always, you have to remember to link your CSS. So I just link my CSS. If I link my CSS and I don't need to say, let me just comment this one up. If I link it and I refresh, hopefully my button is yellow. I can see that my button is yellow. So HTML is for our content, CSS is for our styling. But then what JavaScript allows us to do is it allows us to be dynamic because we can't be dynamic based on things happening with just HTML. And I mean, with CSS, we can do a little dynamism, but what JavaScript allows us to do, it allows us to be dynamic so that it's not just what I write on the page is what you see at all times. But then I can use JavaScript to write logic to do things based on different states. So make my page more dynamic. Like I can get things rolling about, I can get things floating about. And that's the power of JavaScript. And that's the power of the DOM. The DOM being a representation of our code. So when we write the code, what you are seeing here is just a representation of the code, and it is the DOM. And then we can do things with it. Any questions? Anything doesn't
No,
make sense so far.
this is okay.
Okay. Yeah. So for example, and this thing that we didn't go over, I close things so that I don't get confused. Okay. So in this one, for example, we just had and this is probably not a good thing to do. I have inline style, but when I open this up, opening the file browser, open another browser. So I just have this. It's just static. It's just the things that I've written with my HTML and CSS. But then I can come in with JavaScript and do dynamic stuff. So here, control. I have, and maybe let me move. This is not good to do. So it's not good to write your styling or your JavaScript inside your HTML because you want to separate things, separation of content. So on click, add text, on click, On click, remove text. Now, can you tell me why if I run this thing, it won't work? Any idea why if I run this, it won't work? I mean, you can give a wild guess.
Let's see.
I mean, it doesn't have to be right, but why do you think if I run this, it won't work?
I'm just checking. Oh, no.
Okay, don't stress. The reason it won't work is that I'm not specifying what I'm clicking on. So I'm saying that on click add text, but I'm not specifying what I'll be clicking on. So to be able to do that, I just have to come and specify that maybe, let me give this an ID and add, I don't know, add button. Because I don't have names and ID. I have to specify what I in the document. I have to specify what exactly I'm clicking on. So
Mm,
Control Z, remove button. And I mean, before I just want to show you something. So in the DOM, all these things are separate elements, but to be able to do things with it, I have to like actually specify what I'm clicking on, because all these ones become children of the document. So if we console log document, document. If we console the log document, we can see that all the children are inside. So all these things are part of the document. So you can see when I highlight, this is the heading. So to be able to do things, I have to specify what exactly I'm looking to target. That's why we do that. So I go into the document. I go into the document. So I go into the document. Then I can see that I'm selecting the elements with the ID. I think I gave it the ID. Add button. So let me just, I gave it the ID add button. Then I can, so now then let me just save it in a variable so that I don't have to keep writing. And then I can do const remove button is equal to, again, just select the thing I want to use. So get elements by ID, remove button. So now I can just use that here and do add button, add button dot on click. So when I click, I'm specifying. So now it'll work because then now I'm specifying remove button when I click on the button. So
mm,
when I click on that, I want to run this function. So all this fancy thing is doing is that, and I mean, I shared this code. So I mean, if you want to take your time and look at it, but all this is doing is that if I click on it, I want to add some text. So if I click on this, you can see that it's adding new text. Let me just close this thing. So if I click on it, it's adding text. So I'm making my page more dynamic. I can keep adding. Now I can scroll. And when I click on this, I want to remove text. So I can remove. Oh, I think I made a mistake. If I click on this, remove text, I'm running the same function when I click on. So this is remove. If I click on it, I want to remove text. And so if I say, not save, if I refresh this, if I click on this, it's adding text. If I click on this, why is my function not working? Whenever something is not working, just come to the console and see. It's not a type of node, okay. Apparently I made a mistake somewhere. Oh, okay, it's not paragraph. Okay, not to stress about it. So it says I made a mistake. It's not a paragraph. I don't know. I have to look at it. Filter, remove child on node. One is not a type of node at line 18. What is going on line 18? Document of query select a paragraph. Remove child. Okay, not too stressed about it. Yeah, so I mean, that's an example of the DOM. So just to quickly recap the things that we've been going over. Uh, and if you have any questions, just so we said that the DOM is a representation of our core. So we said that the DOM is a representation of our program. So when we open it in a browser, what we see is a representation of it. So we can take advantage of that and do stuff with it. So when our browser has loaded our page, that when our page is loaded, the browser creates a document of our application. Then we can take advantage of that. So this is how it is. So this is the document being the parent, and everything we had inside our page comes as subtrees. And then we can take advantage of that, select things and do stuff with it. So we looked at some methods that come with a DOM, but we can select the inner HTML. So we can select the actual content on the page. So we can target the paragraph, select the content on the page and change it to something else. We can grab an element by a particular ID and do something with it. We can add an event listener. And we said we can use query selector for more general things. So if we don't want to select by ID, we could select, and maybe let me just quickly show you something. So query selector allows us to just target everything without having to specify if it is an ID or something. So in this example, because it is a button, we're just using a button. So for example, if this button had an ID, we could still use a query selector to select it. So let's the way, and sorry if it's confusing, but query selector is more powerful, where we can select everything regardless of if it's an ID, just an element or a class. Get element by ID is more specific for just ID. So here, query selector, if we wanted to select a button with the ID, we just give it an ID of button. So we could, I mean, right now, just work if we just select button because it's the only button. But we could also we said we use hash for IDs and select button. So we could even use query selector to select an ID. If it was a class is the dot symbol. So we can just do this. So we can use query selector to select everything. Get element by ID, we can only use it to select things that have IDs on them. Yeah, so these are some of the properties: selecting things, changing the inner things. We also spoke about events, how we can do things based on user interaction. So like the example you were given, that if a user double taps on a picture, change the color to red. Then change the little button at the corner there to change it to red. Things like that. So all those things are events where you do something based on what the user is doing. So there are times when, like when usually when you go on a page, when the page is downloading, you see that things will pop up, like maybe like some ad will come up that sign up for 30% discount. That's an example of an event. So it fires off when the DOM has loaded. So when the document has finished loading. So there's so many events. I mean, you just use them as and when what you want to do based on what you're trying to do, all those things. Any questions before we run away?
No, it's clear.
Okay, I hope it wasn't confusing. I hope I mean I'm sure like always new material, it doesn't always make sense immediately. But I mean
Uh,
and it's probably your first pass of, right? So I mean I'll share the slides, you can take your time, just look
yeah.
at it. But yeah, don't be confused. The only thing, if you forget anything, the only thing you want to remember is that when our page loads, our browser creates a version of it, which is a document, and the document is just a representation of our code. And then we can use that document to do dynamic things. So we can target the document and use it to make changes, use it to do things, use it to listen for events, and all those fun stuff. Yeah, so
Mm.
hopefully we learned.
And
Okay, go on.
Cornelius, what you posted in the chat, I'm
Mhm.
not able to copy it. I don't know how come. I don't know. Maybe there's another way to share it.
Wait, let me just, I'm coming, 1 second. Let me just, will it be good if I shared it with you on WhatsApp?
Yeah, maybe in the in the group. I don't know if that will work. Yeah,
Uh, Control C.
can try
Um,
and see if it works.
I'm sharing it right. Let me see if it'll work before we. If not, I could also okay, usually when I stop recording, I'm also able to save the chat. Okay, I'm also unable to copy. Which is weird.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. But maybe I'll just make a print screen. That's fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I could always share the code with you. I mean, I'll share what we did. I hope I didn't delete. I hope I didn't delete it.
I think you
Okay. Let me just copy from here and just share on the page.
okay.
Okay, I just shared it to the page. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, thank you for joining, and I hope we learned something. I mean, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to message me, or if you need help with any of the stuff, feel free to let me know. But thank you for joining, and hopefully you have some fun playing around with it. And I'll see you
You too.
on Tuesday, God willing.